On Friday, February 12th, we got treated with a pretty extensive podcast from the Tarkov community, but more importantly, Nikita. Now, usually these things don't have all that much detail in them. They hash over stuff that people have already talked about quite a bit, so there isn't always a lot of new stuff to talk about. This is different though, and there is a lot here to cover. Now I'm going to get into the details. I'll expand on some of the stuff they talk about a little bit of the history, things like that, but we're going to do a TLDR version of this up front real quick. I'll just go over some bullet points of the big stuff for those of you that want it. That way you don't have to sit through a 15-20 minute video, whatever this is going to end up being, to get the whole story. With that being said, YouTube videos are heavily dependent on watch time and how long people watch them for them to be successful. So hopefully, because I gave you the TLDR, even if you don't want to watch the rest of it, maybe you mute the tab and let the video play all the way through. Help me out a little bit because I helped you out. So with that begging and pleading out of the way, let's get through the bullet points. I'll hit on the big topics and then we'll dive into it and talk about everything else afterwards. I'll put some chapters down below to help you jump around to if you want and look at the specific topics, things like that. So first up, global limits. They're not going anywhere. These are the limits on traders. So when you go in to try and get like a slick from Ragman or sometimes an items case, they are generally sold out and you can't get them without camping the traders. Nikita says this is how he wants it and it's not going anywhere. Second up is Nikita is considering some kind of permadeath thing related to radiation in the game. It's not planned, it's not there yet. They're building the structures for it, but it's something they're considering. Next up, Nikita talked about in the final version, there's going to be a free roam version and a exfil infill raid like we're used to playing right now. Both are going to be in the game. So not only will it be free roam open world, you will have the go into a raid, get out of a raid style of gameplay as well. Not news to some, but expanded on a little bit. The final game will not have wipes, at least the core story playthrough. You'll play through it and it won't reset. Your character lasts forever. It's persistent. But there will be like a second profile of some sorts that does do seasonal wipes or changes or resets, however you want to look at it. We all remember the wonderful Santa interaction system. Nikita said that may lead to a more complex interaction with Scav AI. Nothing 100% planned yet, but they were very interested in how that pickup and trading and mechanic worked, and they may implement that with AI. But we won't be doing traders with that. There's been some speculation that the in-game traders will work that way. Next point is in-game traders are going to have their entirely own interaction system, dialogue boxes. It'll be similar, Nikita said, to a action RPG system where you talk with them, there's dialogue and all that kind of stuff. Then on that, he also said there's not going to be any GRU. People have thought that we were going to have GRU running around streets, kind of like you have rogues screwing up bears, you have GRU screwing up USEC, but he said there's no GRU plan. He said it was a flippant comment that he regrets even bringing up. It was an idea that he wished he had kept secret. There's no plans for it. It was just something he was thinking about. Also, the final version of the game is going to have points of no return. For example, if you piss off a trader, do something, one of the many tasks that are in there now that don't affect us, you can still keep them. There will be events where you will lock a trader for the rest of your playthrough on that persistent account. So points of no return that you have to make a choice one way or the other. He then expanded on the Lighthouse discussion. He says there will be no Lighthouse expansion. There's not going to be any new areas to explore. Now, does this mean that the lighthouse itself, that little island and peninsula, we're not going to be able to get out there? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell what he meant by that. If he meant that that's not going to be expanded on and we're not going to get out there, but in the past they said it was going to be available, just not right at release. So it might be a while before we can actually get out there. Who knows? And with this, all the current work is not geared on content for Lighthouse. It's geared on optimization and making the game run better, especially on Lighthouse and the frame issues everybody has there. He also mentioned we're not going to see storyline quests until the end of the game, or until 1.0 releases. So we won't get any preview of the storyline until full release is done. And I'm glad for that. I kind of want to be able to experience the storyline with everybody else, not get a heads up. So when this game does go 1.0, we can all experience it kind of together. He mentioned tons of tidbits about streets. We'll get into those later, but things about their goals, dreams and aspirations, and then some of the features coming that are going to be specific to streets that may eventually spread to other maps. One of the guys asked about further stash locking. So you're going to be able to lock your stashes even further as far as like locking an item so it doesn't move, which I guess is pinning. But then you can also lock items and cases so that they don't get used in tasks. You can't sell them, you can't delete them, things like that. Airdrops are also getting expanded, so we're gonna get more content with those as far as more features, ideas, content, that kind of jazz. So we're not done with the growth of the airdrops. We're gonna see a further expanded modding system for sure, and there may even be a skill link to this that will require for some of the more advanced mods. He wasn't totally sure, it was just kind of an idea it sounded like he had while he was talking about it. He mentioned that the heavy and light armor systems are gonna be coming soon. So we can see those skills here. We don't really know what they do or what they're applied as, but they're going to change a lot of the way people play in the game, it looks like. Or at least that's what Nikita implied. He also said DLSS is on the way. It's not a magic fix. It's going to have bigger effects on people that play 2K and 4K. But along with that, FSR, which I guess is the AMD version of that, is in the works as well. And then the last thing for this TLDR punch through is the dev podcast. It was going to be next week, he said. So like maybe around the 19th. But with everybody getting sick with COVID at BSG, they had to push it. So he said maybe 2 weeks. So hopefully we'll get some more stuff there. We'll see. All right, so now let's get into the nitty gritty. Some of the stuff that they talked about that I thought was interesting that could be expanded on. We all know Nikita's on Twitter. He talked a little bit about why he got into there and what it's for. So he sees Instagram and some of the other social media as more thought out, processed things. Like Instagram, for example, he says he spends a lot of time editing the photos and doing post-production to make them really pretty and put out a really high-end content kind of deal with those. But Twitter is more for his like flippant thoughts, just things he's thinking about. He can get out there quickly and discuss. We've kind of seen that with some of the questions he's asked the community. So he's liking it being on there. He was kind of worried about getting on there. Twitter is well known for how it's not awesome, but he seems to be enjoying it. And most of us as content creators in the community seem to be as well. The folks in the podcast also expanded on lengthening the early gameplay. All of these things about locking stuff on the flea market, making the hideout harder, flea market at 15. All of this stuff has been meant to slow down the progression of the game. And it looks like BSG is really happy with where it's at. There's more stuff they want to do, but it's the best they've seen so far as the things they've done to try to lengthen the wipe cycle and slow down the gameplay loop overall. Now with this, they kind of rolled into talking about wipes. Now wipes weren't in the original plan, but with how players kind of like starting over with everybody else and that early wipe gameplay, Nikita wants to find a way to implement it yet. They're not sure exactly how they're going to do it. The core game is not going to have wipes. It's going to be a playthrough. You're going to play through the system, try to escape Tarkov, which he says not everybody's going to be able to do. It's going to be a very difficult and hard thing. So don't plan on everybody escaping Tarkov. But that's going to be the original playthrough. There's going to be a second set that's going to be kind of like a second profile, if you will, that's going to have seasons that reset and stuff like that. At least that's the general idea right now. We'll have to see what we actually end up with. Now, kind of expanding on 1.0, he was talking about free roam mode or open world, what a lot of us talk about. And it's not going to replace the current system. It was kind of hard to flesh out what he was talking about, but the way it sounds like is you're going to have choices whether you go through the free roam mode and it's going to have its own rewards and risks, or just into a raid and out of a raid and it has its own rewards and risks. Now, there will be people on like let's say customs that are doing free roam, as well as people in the same raid that are doing a insert exfil kind of deal right out of that zone. So there will be overlap. Again, this is based on technical issues. They're not 100% sure they're going to be able to make it happen, but that's what they're working towards. Right now, they're not even sure open world is technically possible. They're working at it. Things like Unity upgrades and stuff like that will be heavily dependent on if they can get there. Now, speaking of Unity, they've tracked a lot of the issues with frame rates and problems they've had, and it sounds like Scav AI is a big part of it. That's why Lighthouse has such a big issue, is there's a lot of AI on that with the rogues and just regular Scavs and stuff like that on there. But on top of that, the more complicated the AI gets, the more load there is on the server and the client's CPUs. And with the game already being CPU bottleneck, that's going to cause lots of performance problems. And it sounds like there's some issues with the Unity engine that they're trying to work through that just stack on top of all of this. Early this wipe, they dialed down how many rogues were and AI overall were on Lighthouse, and they said they saw as much as a 15% performance boost across the board. That's funny because we just upgraded to 2019 not too long ago, and it sounds like they're already looking at 2020, and the Unity team itself has already moved on to 2021. And those different versions cause all sorts of issues themselves trying to get support and help and figure out bugs. Now, for global limits, when they were talking about global limits, Nikita said this is exactly what they want. They want items to be rare. And if you want them, you need to go through the extra effort to get them. Certain things, he wants people to see them and know there's people in the world that have them, but that they can't get them. And whether that emotion is happy or sad, that's what he wants. He's trying to drive towards that. So trader limits aren't going anywhere time soon, folks. We might see different iterations of them. And once we get into the 1.0 version of the game, they might matter completely different. If all the traders are in raid and you got to go visit them, I think it's going to be a little bit different with restocks and things like that. But he expanded and said that the economy eventually is going to be dynamic, which means it's not going to be somebody changing manual numbers, putting in stuff for limits. The algorithm, as he said, is going to decide, how much stock traders have, how much is in the raid, what's on the flea market, which maybe that means that like if traders are out of stock, the item's banned, or the vice versa. If the traders have it, you can't sell on the flea market. I don't know what he means, but he definitely linked all three things: in world spawns, trader stock, and the flea market. So that'll be really interesting. So I guess just adapt and overcome. Get used to it and find other gear that you can use to replace that gear you can't get from the barters that are on the traders you have to camp. As far as scav karma, I think we're all really lucky. Anybody who got negative karma, anybody who killed a bunch of Santas and got negative karma, you should probably feel pretty fortunate they even gave you a chance to get out of negative karma, because it doesn't sound like Nikita has a lot of pity for this. He explains that he wants that system is how he wants it. If you make bad decisions, bad things happen to you. His quote's actually pretty funny if you listen to it.
Sometimes you just suck. And this is it. You cannot do anything about it. This is your, I don't know, you was born like this. And this is it. You cannot do anything about it. This is what you need to, struggle all of your life, like before, till the end of the life, of course.
Now, this also led into this talk about radiation and permadeath. Now, the community went bonkers over this over the last couple of days. And I don't think it's quite as big of a deal as everybody's making it out to be. For one, it doesn't sound like it's 100% going to be implemented. It's an idea he has. They are building the architecture for it. You can see radiation stuff in the game. And they talked a little bit about equipment with a question Sigma had. But the general idea is that you're going to have an area that's going to be irradiated. It's going to have special kinds of loot. If you go in there for a short period of time, you'll be fine. But if you go in there for a very long period of time, you could end up getting very, very sick. He kind of explained it to a sickness on Morrowind, an older game where you have the sickness throughout the whole game. But he said that you die, and the only way you can get your character back is by resetting your account. Now, this sounds like it needs to be fleshed out a whole lot more. I wouldn't spool up over it. There needs to be more things to figure out how this is going to work. And it's not going to be something that's going to happen to everybody. But it's kind of fun to think about and consider that maybe there is permadeath or actually true hardcore mode in Tarkov.
We actually have this design already ongoing, the game design, and we want to have this design completed just in case quickly started to produce this feature into the game without any notice, of course.
Now, Nikita joked, I don't know if he really meant it as a joke or if he was being serious, but he said the system's going to be built and ready to go. That way, if they want to implement it on the fly and not tell anybody about it, they can. So keep that in mind. You shot Santa, you lost karma, and you said you didn't know, even though they told us. But at the same time, they might not tell us there's going to be radiation in the area. So something to keep a mind out for. Now, this rolled into discussions about the in-game traders and if the Santa interaction system was going to be how we were going to interact. And Nikita just kind of frowned and nodded his head. He said, no. But they may take the Santa interactions and make it so where we can interact with AI scavs that way, which would be interesting because right now, if you're a PMC, it's just KOS with scavs, unless you're on that one task bullshit that you can't kill them. Other than that, you just shoot scavs. There's no reason to not shoot them. So implementing some kind of trading system with them or something along those lines is pretty interesting to me because it means that it's just more dynamic choices you can have in raid. But he expanded on what the traders were going to be, and they're going to have their own interaction system, their own UI. If you go interact with them in raid. So you're going to go into raid, you're going to go find a trader, you're going to go talk to them. There's going to be a dialogue. There's going to be all sorts of stuff that is completely unique, new to the game, none of us has seen before. And because of this new system, he also talked about points of no return in the final version. So right now there's a couple of tasks you can do, like the folder 0022 that you got to get on woods, and you turn into one of the traders. And if you turn it into one of the other, it pisses the other ones off, but it doesn't have any long lasting effects. You can usually get your rating back up and get max traders no matter what quest you pick. Skier's even got a task that you can give him 1,000,000 rubles and he will loyalty buyout, and he gives you 0.25 rating with Skier. So that being said, he says there's going to be points of no return where eventually you're going to have to make a decision that's going to lock potentially a trader for you for the rest of your playthrough. So you won't be able to use that trader ever again. And that'll just all be part of the storyline quests, which we won't get till 1.0. He says that they're working on them. They're going to be ready to go, but he will not introduce them to the game or show anybody about them until the game goes into its final version and goes into release, which, like I said before, I'm happy for because I don't want it to get spoiled. It's going to be cool to play new Tarkov. Even after how many ever years of playing it, you're going to have this storyline that none of us have ever experienced before. And a lot of our experiences over the years are going to get explained. There's going to be aha moments of, oh, that's why this is why it is in the game, which I think is going to be a lot of fun and pretty cool. There was a lot of questions about Lighthouse and the expansion. Nikita said there's not going to be an expansion to this extent that there's going to be new areas to explore. They're going to add bosses and some other things, but the primary goal is to work on performance and get the FPS up so people can actually play the map a little bit better. And with that saying that there's not gonna be new areas, he also mentioned that the sniper boss, there's gonna be a scav boss that's gonna be a sniper, is gonna protect the lighthouse. So I don't know if he means that there's just not gonna expand areas on other parts of the map, maybe over towards like the train station or something, but maybe the lighthouse area is already there, it's just not released yet, so he's not considering that a new area. I don't know. It was kind of murky with that. I wish people would have got a little bit more in depth on the questions there, but right now we don't know, other than sniper scav boss is gonna protect the lighthouse area. There's going to be other bosses added that are going to roam, so that's going to be kind of weird. Maybe all of this crazy loot that we can get is going to be blocked by some kind of crazy killer type boss that's at the, some USEC boss that's up at the cottages. So, all those handy hatchet runners and pistolines that run up there with no gear just get absolutely slaughtered instead of just free looting. But nonetheless, he said these updates are going to be coming soon, but they're not right around the corner. Again, they're focused primarily on getting the optimizations and getting the map running better. And then because of this conversation, they spooled into talking about GRUs. Somebody asked him about that, and Nikita said, he's like, I don't know where you guys got that idea from. There's not going to be any GRUs. He's like, somebody asked me, and I mentioned it as an idea, and I regret it. I wish I'd kept it secret. It wasn't anything that we have planned or thought out. So keep that in mind. No GRUs, at least in the foreseeable future. And that was geared towards Streets and stuff like that. He did say that Streets can have tons of different AIs. Amongst all this stuff he talked about with Streets with the different extracts and features and, buttons and dynamic stuff that can happen on the map that eventually may work to other maps. Specifically, the idea of Streets is it's a test bed for this whole open world concept with as big of a map and as many AI on it to get it to where it'll function. Because if they can do that, they feel like they can do everything else they want to do. And his goal, he said, is he wants 60 frames on an average PC on the map, which that would be amazing. A lot of people are pretty skeptical if they can do it. We'll see. I have faith. I think BSG is going to work there. I think they've got an awesome team behind them. It's just, we got to give them time. And then he said that they're talking about Unity 2020 already for the ETS, which means even though we only got 2019 back in November or December, I remember it was early last year where they upgraded to 2019. We're already looking at 2020, which is pretty cool. He says it might have some effects on performance on our end, but more importantly, it's just more dev tools for them and it helps them get stuff done faster, debug, things like that. So that'll be good. Especially, he's saying there's a bunch of architectural flaws in the game itself, things that they just didn't foresee when they first started and they had no way of foreseeing. 2020 hindsight, they say yes, they would have done things differently, but they don't have a choice now. So they're just kind of working through those architectural flaws, as he said it, to get the game better and get it playable for all of us in a more sustainable way, stable way, and less buggy way. And all of this kind of rolls into how he wants a console version someday. They said they have plans for it. They've worked on it. There's a lot of things that need to come around for it, but it sounds like we may be seeing Xbox and PlayStation players someday, which is kind of cool. Hopefully they don't have aim assist, because screw aim assist, but we'll see how the hell you manage your inventory on a controller. Somebody asked him about the containers that spawn in like Mark Room or like, let's say, Giving Tree, whether it's a backpack, a docs case, whatever it is. He says they pulled the items out of them from spawning. It was a bug. Something wrong with the algorithm. It was making items that weren't supposed to spawn in the items try to spawn. It was hanging the servers up and causing all sorts of issues. So they pulled all the items out because that was the quickest fix until they can get to fixing the problem. So items will be coming back. They're gone now because it's causing server problems.
Yes, we took it away because the algorithms of items spawning inside the containers was kind of broken, because it actually broke the servers, because some of the items were unsupported for this particular container and the server started to hang and everything. So we just decided to remove it, not to fix it. We just remove this until further things. So most likely we will reintroduce this thing later, but right now we just remove it for the sake of stability.
So just keep that in mind with everybody that's upset because they're not getting their red cards out of document cases or whatever when they're in raid. The crew also asked Nikita about more functionality in our stash as far as sorting, the ability to lock containers. And he said, oh no, it's not just gonna be locked, you're gonna be able to pin. So you can pin something so it won't move, and then you can lock something so that it won't, you can move it around, but it won't get used in tasks or crafts, or you can't delete it on accident, things like that. So I think that's pretty cool. It'll be handy to be able to have that functionality. So looking forward to that. He said it wasn't gonna be soon, but it's on the horizon. And then he moved on to talking about elite skills a little bit, touched on that. There's been a lot of talk lately in the community about elite skills and how broken they are or unbalanced they are and this, that, and the other. And he agreed. He says he doesn't like where skills are right now. He wants to redesign them, but that's for a later date. They're going to get a bunch of this other stuff and then come back and redesign skills. He's not super worried about it because it affects such a small portion of the player base. Not a lot of people have these elite skills. Elite strength, maybe you can make an argument for, but even then, I don't think there's a lot of people that affects. Is it unfair that some people can walk in with more gear than others, run faster? Yeah. Does it really change fights up all that much? I don't think so. I don't think there's a whole lot of fights that people are winning or losing because of their elite strength. Usually other factors that play into that. But that's just my opinion. Anyways, he said that there's more nerfs coming for the skills, so maybe we'll see some nerfs coming for elite strength and endurance, and some of these others. Perception, I think, is the other one a lot of people gripe about. That's one that you could argue is affects engagements quite a bit, because that one does. I think that one is kind of silly that you hear further. But he says a lot of these features and changes are stalled out because they get an idea and they like how it would affect your average player and how they experience the game. But players that are meta players, meta slaves, as some of you guys like to say, that push things to the limit on one end or the other, they kind of break the system. And while for a majority of players it would work fine, these fringe players just don't have a big enough effect to warrant effort right now. Eventually, yes. There is going to be more skills coming, like we said, the light and heavy armor skill, he said, which is going to cause problems. He says people are going to meta that out and they're going to have to tweak that. But again, he said something along the lines of they need to figure out ways when they implement new features to block unlawful deeds. So I don't know if that's a translation or him trying to be funny, but essentially people using the systems in an unintended way. And from that, he rolled into this idea of people complaining and not liking the game, of, you know, people need to get used to more toughness here, because when we do get into the final version, not everybody's going to escape from Tarkov. Not everybody's going to win the game. Some people are going to get permadeath. Some people are never going to get out. It's just going to depend on your play and how much work you're willing to put into it.
Some of you will complete the game, because to escape from Tarkov, it will be a really hard task. Not for everybody. Not everybody will escape from Tarkov. You must be prepared for it. When we will release all of the storyline quests and will be end game, the main idea that not everybody will escape from Tarkov. You will have a chance if you will be like hard enough and you will work hard enough to escape from Tarkov. You will escape from it and you will receive this magnificent badge that you actually escaped from Tarkov, and mama will be happy.
As far as airdrops, Nikita did ask on Twitter a little while ago how people would feel about if players could call them in. I think that's a bad idea, but that's my opinion. I don't know where they're going with it, but he did say that there's more features, there's more changes, ideas, things coming with airdrops, and things are going to be implemented. He didn't want to give us, he wants to surprise us, much like he did with the airdrops, but it's one of his favorite features. And if it's that, for sure, you can tell they're going to expand on it and add more depth to that kind of play style on that area of play. Kind of circling back around to streets, he mentioned that like 85-90% of the team is committed to streets right now to get that worked on and all the stuff that is involved with that. There's going to be so many new features that come with streets, as far as extracts, getting into raid, getting out of raid, moving to different maps, you know, dynamic events like switches and things, multiple scav bosses, tons of AI, and just all these other functionalities that they're going to test out on streets, and then hopefully be able to push them to other maps. Kind of like, you know, Think Reserve was one of the earlier maps we had switches and dynamic kind of events, like the pushing the alarm, the wee woo to go get out of Hermetic, or the D2 now. And then after that, they put stuff on customs, like the power switch for ZB13, I believe, under Alamo. You know, those things can spread to other maps. He even mentioned that there might even be something that you do, like you flip a switch in Resort and something happens on Lighthouse, which would be wild. You know, crazy if you're sitting on Lighthouse and something happens and it's somebody in a completely different map did. But the ideas there are pretty limitless to where they can go with that, which is cool. He did emphasize that the lab's entry point is going to be from other maps. That's going to be probably the first way they go into testing this kind of open world concept. Streets and Factory is pretty much what they talk about now. That's going to be the only way to get in and out of labs. So if you want to go to labs, you got to load into Factory, then you got to go to labs. And he says it's going to create camping and other problems with hackers and all sorts of issues, ruining that experience for players, and they're just going to have to work through it. And as far as they're going to have to work through it, he means BSG is what he's not. We're going to have to work through it. He's something they're going to have to do to balance and find better ways to make that system more playable for everybody. And with that, he got into the raid timers, which was really interesting to me, because he says they're not 100% going away. Raid timers were never supposed to be part of the game. He's mentioned that in the past, but they like how it provides that kind of, not artificial, it provides that deadline. It makes a pressure point for you to get in and out of raid. So he's not 100% sure they're going away, but he doesn't know exactly how they're going to be implemented yet, or exactly how that's going to play itself out in the final version of the game. That still is to be determined. And then another one is the arena. Arena is apparently going to have an integral part of the gameplay loop, the whole playthrough, the Escape from Tarkov campaign, if you will, the storyline. The arena is going to be part of that, but it's also going to be its kind of standalone deal, almost kind of like Warzone is for Call of Duty. Arena is going to be, you can get Arena by itself. It's going to be cheap. Players can buy that and play that, but if they want more features, they want more customizability of their weapons and things, they'll have to get Tarkov. Now, if you have EOD, you're going to get the Arena for free, he says. If you don't, you have to pay for it, but it's going to be pretty cheap. And then kind of one of the other features that, you know, things coming and going out of the game is the auction house. He says it may not even be in the final game. They don't like the current system in the aspect of how so many items trade hands, and there's not anything special on the flea market. And that's what the auction house idea was meant more for, was some kind of special place to sell special items. What comes to mind for me is way back when I used to build the gunsmith guns, just build them out, and then I would sell them for, you know, 20, 30,000 rubles in profit on the flea market before things had to be found in raid. And I did okay doing that. It was kind of fun. I liked building the guns. I'd build 5 or 6 of them. I'd list them and they'd sell and people didn't have to do the work for gunsmith. So maybe something like that. I don't know. That's my own assumptions. I have no idea that that's going that way or not. That's just my own thoughts. But he did expand on advanced weapon modding. He talked about more parts coming for the AK. You know, I'm thinking things like triggers, maybe hammers, bolt carriers, things like that inside M4s, AKs, some of the other weapon systems that you can mod just like you can on the 1911. You know, you got the slide and the trigger and the hammer, and I think same thing with USB 45. So we're probably going to see some of that coming. But he implied that there might be a new skill, an advanced weapon modding skill for some of the more advanced mods, and, you know, maybe tuning gas blocks or springs or some of the crazy stuff you can get into with gun modifications. But that sounds pretty flippant too. Wouldn't bank on it, though it would be super cool. It would be nice to have some kind of limitation based on your gunsmithing abilities and skills on what you can modify on your guns. And then the last little bit here, we'll wrap this up. If you're hanging out, I fucking greatly appreciate it. You guys are amazing. The Dev Podcast. Nikita talked about a lot of stuff here. He said he wanted to do on the Dev Podcast because the Dev Podcast was supposed to be next week, but they couldn't do it because of the all the people at BSG getting sick with COVID. But maybe in 2 weeks they do it. So somewhere around the 19th, maybe. We'll see. And he wants to show us stuff, but he doesn't want to show us stuff because he don't want to spoil it. So we'll just have to tune in and see where it goes from there. Nonetheless, we got a ton of information on this podcast. It was super cool. It kind of cleared up the light and the fog in front of us on what BSG is working on, where they're at, what we can expect to see. So I'm pretty excited for the next couple of months. I think we're going to see some cool changes and watch the game head into a pretty awesome direction. But with that, we'll wrap it up. Like and subscribe if you haven't. And appreciate you watching if you did, even if you only wanted the TLDR. Thanks for hanging out. Wish you the best of luck in your raids. We'll see you in Tarkov.